Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your guide to the whitetail woods. Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel for the stand, saddle, or blind. First Light. Go farther, stay longer. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
All right, welcome back to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by First Light and their Camo for Conservation initiative, in which a portion of every sale of their whitetail camo gear goes back to the National Deer Association, which is doing some really good stuff for deer and deer hunters. I'm actually out this week hunting on the Back 40, which the National Deer Association now owns and uses as a new hunter training ground, helping new hunters get into this thing. So they're doing great stuff. I'm glad we're supporting them. That said, this week on the show, we are chatting with an under-the-radar big buck machine. This is a guy who some of the best deer hunters that I know say is one of the best deer hunters they know. He's someone who has previously resisted the spotlight. He's someone who has not shared his tactics or hunting strategies online before or in podcasts before. He's a person who has more 150-inch bucks on the wall than I have years of my life. All right? This is someone you've probably not heard of, but someone you're definitely going to want to learn from today. And this guy's name is Brad Davis. Brad's a realtor for Mossy Oak Properties, and he's a friend of the Lone Wolf Custom Gear crew over there. And he came by recommendation of a mutual friend of ours, Justin Hollinsworth, who's been on the show here today. And what we're going to do here shortly is talk to Brad and break down his approach to hunting mature whitetails and what makes his approach unique, I think. And the main thing we focus on here today is how he has simplified deer hunting. A lot of us overcomplicate deer hunting. A lot of us go in all these different crazy directions and try to pattern this thing and try to think about this thing and consider this factor and this factor and this factor. And Brad says, no. Let's just look at the terrain and the topography, think about where deer are going to eventually move through, and then let's wait them out. Let's get there with the right wind. Let's be bulletproof with wind. Let's know a couple key places, and let's hunt there smart over and over. And let's hunt the next one over and over. So he's got this, I don't want to say simple, but a uncomplicated but smart way to kill big old bucks. And he does it very well. So that's what we're going to talk about here shortly. I think it's a breath of fresh air in a certain way. So I'm excited about this conversation. I think you guys are all going to learn something from Brad that's going to be a useful change of pace. But before that, what I want to do is take a quick second here to catch up with my buddy and right-hand man, Mr. Tony Peterson. Thanks for hanging there quietly while I rambled on, my friend.
Yeah, buddy.
But what I want to do today is something I want to do more often throughout the year, which is take a little time here at the beginning to just catch up on what's going on in our hunting worlds, so that folks can continue to follow our stories throughout the hunting season and what we're doing and learning as we go. So before we chat with Brad, I got to hear, Tony, real fast. Is there anything new in your whitetail world since that Minnesota hunt that you filled your tag and we talked about last week?
Man, other than one of my daughters killed a little buck in Wisconsin kind of that same week that I was hunting in Minnesota. So that was good. Yeah. And I've been taking my other daughter out, and we have our eye. You know me. I'm not a one buck hunter. I'm not a buck namer guy. Like we don't hit list them really in the Peterson household, but we have this buck we call Goofball for obvious reasons. He's a deer that I photographed him this summer and started getting pictures of him, and he's got just a 4-point side. He's just a big woods 2-year-old, and the other side has 4 points, but it comes back over his head and it's real messed up. And my working theory on this is last year, this daughter who I'm hunting with, she hit a buck and we lost it. Too far forward. I got a picture of him a month later, so I know we made it. And now this buck shows up as a 2-year-old, and he's got a really wonky one side, which would kind of correlate with where, the opposite side of where she hit this buck last year. So I'm thinking this is probably that deer. And he has been crazy consistent. So we went last weekend and hunted him, and I don't know about what you've been getting out there in Michigan, but we've been getting a lot of southeast wind.
Yeah.
And I don't set up a lot for southeast wind. So I had a backup blind for the Dude, I had a backup blind for this deer, and I was like, every other sit after this, we can probably make the spot I want to go to work. But that first night, I was like, we can't do it. We got to go in. And this is kind of an experiment. We went in, didn't see anything. And I'm like, I feel like I made a big mistake. Like, I think that buck was bedded too close. I think I pushed it. And we blanked 4 sits. I mean, we were like, if we saw a squirrel, we were stoked. And so that's kind of been my hunting life, other than taking this new guy out here close to the cities. And so I haven't seen a deer while hunting in, I guess, 5 or 6 sits. So I'm kind of like itching to make something happen here.
Yeah. That can be the story this time of year. It can be feast or famine.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
And I mean, you know me, dude. I'm like, the lull isn't real, hunting hot weather, do whatever. And then now, like, there was a full moon during that weekend when I was out there with my daughter, and I was like, gosh, maybe I've been wrong this whole time. Like, maybe the lull is real. Like, you know how it is. You second guess everything when you can't even put a doe or a scrapper in front of you, but it is what it is. So,
well, I've been seeing the opposite, Tony. So I've been a person who's always like, you want to avoid those warm weather days, or at least don't go to your best areas on the warm weather days, so on and so forth. But I actually, have moderated on that a little bit, and I was proven, and you were proven right, kind of, on what I saw here recently, which has been surprising. So let me give you a quick update on my hunting world.
Hold on. Did you just say that it was surprising that I was right?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Hold on. Didn't you just kill a big buck in a morning in the early season?
Like I said, no, I'm just kidding.
And now you're seeing big bucks in conditions that you just didn't think were going to happen, but I said would happen.
You know what, Tony? We all have grown over the years, and we're slowly becoming more wise. And experience is the best teacher, right?
It sure is. So, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so here's what's happening. So as we talked about, I don't think we talked about last week, but a few weeks ago we were talking about kind of our upcoming hunts and stuff, and I told you the story of the main buck I'm after in Michigan. And I am a one buck kind of dude, and I do name the buck I'm after usually. So I've got this deer I call the Wide Nine, and he is a buck that I have had 4 years of history now with, which is the longest I've ever been able to keep tabs on a buck in Michigan with before. And so, I started getting pictures of him again this year. He survived. He showed up in the summer. Cool deer, a lot of encounters. I know a lot about what he does usually. I had a pretty solid idea of like where he beds on these properties I have permission on. So I thought I had him pretty well dialed. The night before opening day, though, I wanted to see if I could get some better, like just some really recent intel. Like, let's see if he's doing what I think he might doing, or if he's moving in daylight somewhere yet. As you mentioned, like, it's hot. It was a very hot spell there at the beginning of October and just preceding that. So conditions weren't great, but I still, anything's possible, right? So I thought maybe I can learn something the night before the season that will give me either the confidence to move back into something that maybe I wouldn't usually with this weather, or I'll confirm like, okay, play it safe, do some more observation. So there's a hill that I can access from the road that usually if I get up on this hill, I can glass down into one of these properties, and there's a power line that stretches off kind of heading southeast, and I can basically that power line runs along the southern border of one of the main zones that this buck beds. And then there's a creek that runs to the northeast that kind of forms the border of the north border of one of these bedding zones. So from a specific location on this hill, if I get there, I can see down that creek a little bit to the north side, and I can see down that power line to the south side. And I can kind of bracket either side of this bedding zone. So it's been a place historically, like if I can get in there and glass from this zone, you can learn some good stuff. Well, the problem this year is that it's standing corn, and you can't see anything from the hill because it's standing corn. So I got to thinking, man, I really want to see what's happening. How can I figure this out? And what I decided to do is I actually brought a ladder out to this place, walked the ladder along the road, and then walked into the standing corn from the road. So people were driving by me on this road. There's like a dude in camo carrying a huge silver ladder. And I got into this spot, put the ladder up in the standing cornfield, and stood up on top of the ladder. And from that vantage point, it was perfect. It had actually worked. Like I could see down the power line. I could see not as far down the creek as I was hoping. There's still a lot of leaves on, but I could see a little ways. So I'm down there. I'm watching deer. I'm seeing deer move. I actually saw the number 2 buck in this area on his feet in daylight the night prior to opening day on like a 78-degree day. So I'm thinking, geez, I can't believe it, but there he is. He's on his feet way, way back in this property, hitting a little green field. And as I'm watching him, I noticed something white, like down beneath me, like close. And I pull my binos down and I look down at the bottom of the hill. And at the bottom of the hill is just this thick, tall, grassy stuff. There's historically maybe like some does. There'll be like a doe family group maybe that hangs out down there and then heads up to this little food plot I've got up there further down. But it's not a spot that I've ever, paid much attention to other than, and there's probably a doe or two in there. Well, I look down there and here's the wide 9, like at the base of the hill right beneath me, standing up out of that tall grass. So there's standing corn all around him and then this tall grass. But then there's also like, houses in the road up there too. He was bedded right up close to the road and the house kind of areas there. And he stands up and I watch him, walk through this tall grass heading towards that food plot. And then a truck pulls across the road, a big semi, and starts backing into one of the houses across the road, making tons of racket and ends up spooking every deer around. All the deer go running away. But I saw him in this place. It was like a wild place to see him hanging out. I've never seen him in there before. So that was a very interesting aha moment. And I'm wondering to myself, was that a fluke? Or is this something he's doing more often now? Like in the past, he's always bedded, this zone I was telling you about that's probably 400 yards to the east of this, back in the core of these properties, like the core of the square mile is usually where he beds. So it's an interesting aha. I hunted that following night, opening night, in a spot that's kind of right in between where I saw him and where he usually beds. There's an oak tree dropping a bunch of oaks, and there's a little food plot tucked in some grass there, and it's this great transition that's usually tight to where he's bedded. Didn't see him that night. The next night, I hunted a different spot that's kind of farther north of there, and this is one of my aha moments. I did not see him, but I did see a 3-year-old and a buck that's 3 or 4 on their feet half an hour before dark, and it was 83 degrees that night. And I saw these two, like, mature, anything over 3 in Michigan is a pretty rare deer. So here's a 3-year-old and a 3, maybe 4-year-old buck on their feet on an 83-degree night, moving. So great to see that. What I did for both of those hunts with that hot weather is I set up in a place, that's low impact. I went to very low impact locations. Like I'm not going to be risky and push into my best stuff, but I set up in places where it could happen and I could see a long ways. Like I wanted to learn. So those are kind of like observation sets with the possibility of something coming together, but mostly, being in the game, but really learning something is how I approached those first 2 hunts, and interesting stuff. So those are the first 2 nights. Now, after that, I was going, or what I'm doing now is I'm hunting on the back 40, not myself hunting. I'm mentoring 2 new hunters on the back 40 property again. We're doing a project kind of recapping folks on what's going on there on the back 40 since we gave it to the National Deer Association and the story of these new hunters that have been using it. So I'm out there helping 2 guys, having a good time so far. Not a lot of deer activity out there yet, but I'm hopeful it's going to get better here soon. But last night, I hear from a friend who is able to be in the area and can see this grassy area as you drive by. The Y9 was back in that grassy pocket again last night. So he was spotted down at the bottom of this hill in that tall grass, the same place I spotted him the night before the opener. So now 2 nights of the last 5, he was spotted bedded in this tall grass right up by the road. So it's very interesting, and he was moving in daylight. So twice now in the first 5 days of October, well, one was the day before October, daylight up by the road in this tall grass, and now we got this big cold front that hit, And now I'm thinking, okay, I can start hunting him again once I'm done in the back 40. So I can hunt on October 8th is the first day I'll be able to hunt myself again. And so now I'm thinking, do I hunt him the way I've thought I was going to hunt him, back in the core where he usually beds, or do I think this is not a fluke and he's now a 5-year-old buck, doesn't like to be around other deer, he's got this little pocket that I never go in there, there's never people in there. Is that a new thing I need to start thinking about? So that's where I'm right now. It's like thinking this whole thing through, and like, is there a way to hunt this deer coming out of this grassy pocket?
When you say that, like, historically that grassy pocket has only, maybe a doe family, not been a real big buck bedding spot, has that been consistent with whatever crops were planted there? Has it been consistent with beans and corn or whatever's been in there?
So, yeah. I mean, it rotates corn, beans every other year. And I'm able to watch this grassy area quite a lot because it's right along that hill where I always go glass from. And I've, for years talked about trying to glass in here when I'm after different bucks and stuff. And so it's not like I haven't been able to watch this grassy pocket in the past. There was one other deer. There's one other buck that used it. And it was that really, really big deer I killed, Frank, like 5 years ago. But that was just during the rut. What he would do is he would lock down with a doe and then like rodeo her into this pocket and then stay with her like all night. And then every morning I would see him coming out of there with that doe. That's the only time I've seen a buck really use that area in the past. Not to say it hasn't happened, and I certainly could have missed it.
I'm just curious.
What do you think about that?
Well, when you say, you've got this kind of grassy swale, grassy pocket in standing corn around it, I mean, that's like such a recipe for big buck bedding. Like it's especially early season stuff. When that's, that corn gets picked, that's a different deal. But I've seen that. I was chasing a buck in southern Minnesota a while back that was bedding in a situation like that and he was a giant. And it happened in the summer, it happened in the early season, and then it was done. And I just think it was like one of those situations where he was catching the wind and avoiding the bugs. And, when they're kind of walled in with corn like that, they love those spots. But, if you've observed it a lot and they just don't historically use it, I wonder why.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. And I mean, when you look at it with fresh eyes, and if I were to look at it, brand new, I'd be like, well, yeah, this doesn't seem like a bad deal at all for him. He's got us, it's probably maybe 3 acres, maybe something like that, maybe 3 acres of this like tall, it's probably over my shoulder height of just grass and brush and crap. And then it's surrounded by standing corn, and then there's houses along the road. But the thing is, like, it's, where he stood up when I saw him, he was probably 100 yards from the road, 100 yards from like houses. So he's right there, close to people. But for me to get back to hunt him, the way I have to access his property, he's not going to see me because he's down in that grass bedded down. But if I were to go through with any kind of southerly wind, he would certainly wind me with any kind of southerly wind coming the way I would usually go into this property. So it's interesting. It changes things up a little bit. Haven't
you been having a bunch of southerly winds?
Yeah.
So is that why he's there?
Certainly could be.
Huh.
I mean, I wonder though, like, do you think bucks are that smart? Like, do they think like, well, I know this dude hunts me, and I know this dude, comes in this zone a lot of ways, and I'd be able to smell him with a southerly wind. Like, are we giving them too much credit? Is he, or maybe not? I don't know.
I don't know, man. If 95% of your year was spent just avoiding predators, and one of your worst predators comes in that way a lot, and the wind would tip you off, you'd probably be clued into that.
Yeah, man, and I gotta say, if I was an old man, and if the last 3 of my best friends were all killed by one person, I would probably get really good at avoiding that one person.
Yep.
That's been his life. His last 4 buddies. So he's had some bad stuff happen to his life.
Do you have a way to watch that buck in the morning to see if you could catch him coming back so you'd know he was in there?
Yeah, and that's what I'm actually going to plan on doing, is I'm going to get up super early and try to get out to this spot where I can get on this hill. I think I can do it without we'll have to see what the wind's doing. But if I can get to this pocket up on this hill and not have my wind blowing down into it, I think I could watch it. So I'm going to try to do that the morning of the 8th, which is the next day I can personally hunt, and try to get out there and watch it and tell for sure. Because that's my big question is like, we have this big cold front that came through, so we're going to have like, these are the best conditions I've had yet this year. It's going to be like 35 degrees cooler than it was. And so I think it's worth taking a good hunt at him, you know? If I had not seen him twice up in this grassy pocket, my good hunt would have been, you know, way back where he usually beds, tight to that stuff. Like I've thought about, there's some oaks dropping in this little woody pocket next to his usual bedding area. I thought about diving into that. Or I've got this little green field way back there that he also frequents that's on the other side of his bedding area. I thought about going in there. But now I'm wondering, like, geez, do I hunt up front? But the problem is, like, if I hunt up front, it's either going to be great because he's there, or it's going to be like a completely lousy hunt. Because if he's not there, there's nothing else there. And it's just going to be sitting there watching people play with their dog or walking the kids, that kind of thing.
Man, when you get a buck like that in early like this and you see him in a spot, my personal opinion is get after him right now, because that pattern's probably going to die, and I wouldn't overthink it. I mean, I've killed a few bucks in the beginning of October, first 2 weeks of October like that, where you just pick them up and you're like, I saw him here. What's going on? And then you go in and kill him the next chance you have. And
yeah.
I wouldn't do the Kenyan overthinking thing here. I just bonsai in there and kill that bastard.
Well, I don't appreciate that you're labeling this as the Kenyan overthinking thing, but I'll gloss past that and just say I like the idea of killing him. So
yeah, go kill him. I got a question for you. When you walk out on the back 40 now after not being there, you know, I mean, you spent a crazy amount of time there for a couple of years, and then now you go back, do this mentor thing. Like, do you feel a sense of like nostalgia when you walk in there?
Man,
is it
do.
Big time? Yeah.
Big time nostalgia, and like a proud daddy kind of thing. Like a proud dad. Like you go out there and you should see what it looks like now, Tony. It's so much better than when you and I were hunting there. Like the fields, you remember in the year you came and hunted, they were dramatically better than the first year. Mm-hmm. But now there is switchgrass like up to my face all over the place. There's all sorts of native vegetation. I mean, there could be deer bedded on every square inch of that place. It looks like a Drury Outdoors Iowa property now.
Wow.
It's pretty impressive. Now, we hunted the last 2 nights and saw just fawns. So it was weird. I was surprised by that. So I have like questions about what's going on. There's tons of acorns everywhere out here right now. Like the white oaks are raining acorns. And we don't have white oaks on this property really anywhere that I know of. So I'm a little worried that they might be sitting in the timber somewhere eating acorns, and that could be what's happening. But the first 2 days we kind of had lousy weather. Yeah. The first day was like 85. The second day was like torrential downpour. So because of that, we stayed on the front half of the farm, like the safer part of the farm. And we saved the back half, like the best stuff for the second part. When this cold front hits, it's now going to be like 20-some degrees cooler and great. So we've got this back half of the trip with great conditions. And now the back half of the farm is, you know, untouched. So tonight we're going to go into a kill spot and hopefully one of them will get a shot.
Nice. Yeah, man. This has been I don't know. This has been a weird year. I was telling my wife the other day, I'm like, I feel like I'm either hunting in beach weather or a downpour and there's nothing else. Yeah. Every day. And it's this bad wind and the acorn thing. I mean, I've heard from people all across the country, and I've definitely dealt with it myself in Minnesota and Wisconsin. The acorn situation this year is wild.
Yeah. A lot of mast. And like you said, it's not a one-off thing. Like everyone seems to be seeing it. Everyone I've talked to at least has been seeing it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that changes things up. It makes your typical, you know, crop fields or little food plots and stuff just not dead, but not quite what they usually are when they can be back in the timber and the cover eating candy, you know?
Yep.
So we'll see. I'll hopefully have an update for you next week or the week after on this whole wide 9 thing and the back 40 thing. These two guys are trying to kill their first deer with a bow. And I've hunted with them the last 2 years in a row, kind of helping them on their journey. So this is hopefully going to be that final step. Be pretty cool if that came together.
What are they open to? Where's the bar set for those guys for what to shoot?
Any adult deer that gives them a really good, safe shot with a bow. So that could be a doe, that could be a forky, anything like that. They would be thrilled with.
Nice. So, that's like a fun way to hunt.
Yeah,
I'm going to be doing that next week down in Oklahoma. That's a fun way to hunt.
Yeah, so give us the 30-second rundown of what hunt you've got coming up. 30 seconds, because we got to shut this thing down and get Brad on.
I am heading down to Oklahoma to hunt public land with Steve Ranella, and we are bow hunting deer, and it is going to probably be a disaster where I'll be back out on my own by the end of October. But maybe not. We'll see.
It was a good run, Tony. I'm glad you were able to work here for a little bit. We're going to miss you, but no, you guys will have a blast. I'm excited to hear about how it goes. I'm sure you guys will have fun.
I hope so, buddy.
Okay, so with all that said, Tony, thank you for giving me the rundown. Thanks for giving me some thoughts and feedback on my hunting stuff going on here. Let's do this again soon so we can kind of keep tabs on what's happening. And now we got to talk to Mr. Brad Davis, who's got some good thoughts, some kind of grounding advice. He takes someone like me who's like all over the place, and I think he kind of brings us back to earth and says, hey, just focus on a couple core things and do them well. That's what we're going to focus on here today. So let's get to Mr. Brad Davis. All right, here with me now on the line, I've got Brad Davis. Brad, thanks for taking time to do this.
Thank you.
So I understand this is your first podcast you've done. So thank you, first off, for being willing to step out on a limb here and talk about this stuff. But I got to tell you the story of how I heard about you and why I wanted to reach out. I was listening to a conversation that your buddy Justin Hollinsworth was having. And Justin's made the podcast rounds. He's been out there talking to a bunch of people recently. So Justin was on my mind, and he was talking about some of his different hunting styles and influences. And he brought up the fact that he has this buddy, and he's got a buddy who has this goal of killing 50 150-inch bucks before it's all said and done. And I heard that, I was like, geez, that is an ambitious guy. And then he said that this friend of his has already killed 38 of them. And I thought, okay, this guy's not only ambitious, but he's really getting it done. So I reached out to Justin after I listened to that podcast, and I said, who is this friend of yours? And he said, well, Mark, that's Brad Davis, and you should talk to him. So here we are, Brad. We are talking, and I got to ask you about that goal. Is that a goal you are still actively chasing?
Oh, yeah. I think when you're younger, you make goals or you kill a few big deer and you think, boy, I'm pretty young, you think I could probably get this done. But as the years go by, you probably up the ante a little bit, and you start letting stuff walk that normally you would shoot or would have shot in younger years. But no, I'm still think it's attainable. There were several years I was able to kill 2 a year, here in Illinois, and that really flattens the curve.
That helps.
But he was wrong. I think I might have told him wrong, but I've only killed 37, so he's one off.
Okay, not too much.
But yes, that's still a goal. Yeah, I'd like to kill 50 over 150.
Tell me about your goal process. Like why have goals like that? How does that keep you focused? How does that fit into the way you approach your hunts?
Well, first of all, I want to let everybody know I'm probably luckier than a lot of people on where I get to hunt. Where I'm in central Illinois, there's big deer. You get into these guys hunting the southern states or the eastern states, and they think you're nuts. But you let 2 or 3 150s walk in a year, and then, you're trying to kill a 160, or a 170, or whatever you've got, but you can only kill what's on the property. And growing up here in Central Illinois, I've been pretty fortunate to be able to be around big deer, and you kind of lose sight of that when you live here and you're in the middle of it. You lose sight of that for the guys that are on the out east or out in the south. You just think, well, how are they not killing 150s? Well, they don't kill them because they're not there. I mean, you just got to remember where you live.
Yeah. Was there any kind of major like threshold for you as you've been going up over the years, as you've been targeting older deer or bigger deer? Was there any kind of moment where all of a sudden you realized, oh, if I want to kill that next tier deer, that's a whole new ball game? Like, this is a whole new thing I need to figure out. Where was that shift for you? Is it like when you went from shooting those first few young bucks to all of a sudden trying to shoot 3 or older bucks? Or was it when is it a certain size deer? When was that big jump in your experience?
Well, I just think it's a progression for a lot of guys. When you've got the quality of deer and you're around good deer, the more you're around them, the more you settle down. You don't get so wound up every time you see a 150 or bigger. Mm-hmm. And there's probably times that you let deer walk that at the end of the season, you think, I probably should have shot him, but that's just part of it. And I've never been too caught up in eating tags. It's kind of been more about, if I don't want to put a deer on the wall or something I'm happy with, just let it go. And
yeah.
There's years it pays off, and there's years that somebody else kills the deer the next year. It's just a crapshoot. You can't make sure that every deer survives every year. And there's been deer I've let pass one year thinking, boy, he'll be a dandy next year. And 2 weeks later, you get a picture from a neighbor, somebody's killed him. So, but as far as I don't know. I think after everybody probably gets into the same, when you kill a half a dozen 140s, then you just keep moving up the ladder. You think, well, I want to kill a 150, then I want to kill a 160, then you want to kill and everybody wants to kill a 200, but it's just a needle in a haystack to find a 200. So I don't know. I just think a guy's you gotta have some patience and not get too caught up in this. I don't know. Social media to me has changed the way a lot of guys, they want to promote themselves, and that's not me. But guys that want to promote themselves, they want to kill big deer every year, and whatever it takes is what they do. But I actually enjoy hunting more than the killing. I mean, and that's probably part of the reason I don't mind letting 150s or a 160 walk, is because as soon as you kill that deer, then you're on to the next one. And that deer's gone from the herd. He can't grow. He can't get bigger for the next year. So I think patience and the fact that after you kill a certain number, you just kind of can get to the point that you can let them go. But there's really was nothing that I can say, hey, this is really what triggered it. I've just always loved chasing the bigger mature bucks.
So what's the goal for this year? Do you have, are you?
Well, I've got 2 bucks.
Specific deer or
I've got 2 bucks that both made it last season. One of them's on a piece of ground that's a personal property, that my own farm. And I let him go last year. We thought he's a clean 10. Thought he was in the 160s last year. Let him go twice, videoed him, and he did survive. He made it. I did not find his sheds. I don't know where he went for the winter, but I never found his shed. But he put on a couple of stickers and an 11th point this year, so he's a little bigger. Not huge. I mean, he might be 170, but I got another buck I think he's a young buck, but man, he's got about everything you'd want. He's got junk, and he's got tall tines, and I don't know if he's survived or not. I had pictures of him in late January before he shed, so I know he made it that far, but I don't know since. I've not got any pictures of him. But it's a small plot. It's like a 4-acre piece. And maybe he'll show up again this year, late season, because he didn't show up there till last year, till December. And I'm pretty
okay.
I've seen that happen a lot of times. Deer will show up late season, and the next year the same thing. They won't show up till late season again. So that's the 2 target bucks I've got. and we'll see what happens. The game begins at the end of one season. The next season starts.
Yeah. So with that home buck, the buck that's on your personal farm, what does that game look like at this point? So I guess two parts of this question. One, what did you do from the end of last season until now to prepare yourself for this? And then I'm curious, where's your head at, like right now? The Illinois season just kicked off a handful of days ago. Where do things stand now in that? That would be my two-part question.
Well, first of all, I've got my farm this year is all standing corn. And I've only gotten pictures of him on 2 different cameras, one time each. Last year, and I always tell guys to pay attention. If you see a mature buck moving through the woods or you see him bed, pay attention to the wind, the conditions, pay attention to why he's where he's at that day. And he was bedding up next to another fence. He was right up against, my back was laying against the fence last year, and and that's where he's bedding this year. He's back there now. But it's an old pasture that I would have to cross an old pasture, and I'd have to have an east wind. Well, we don't get hardly any east winds here. So I'll let it go. I'll just let it ride a little bit here. I know some guys don't care. And I'm friends with Andre DeQuisto and Cody. Those guys are aggressive. I am not aggressive. I'll be the first to tell you, I'm more a sit back, let it play out type hunter. And I don't use scents. I don't use I don't use anything. No rattling antlers. I just don't. And I've seen pluses and minuses of all that stuff, but I just don't. I play the wind 100%, and I just think that buck has been there that long. Well, he's grown up there. And does he leave? Yeah, he probably does. He probably gets to the neighbors. But he's made it this long, and I feel confident of where he's staying, and where he's staying is what I consider my sanctuary. So I'll let it play out until my conditions get better. As far as I got to get the corn out, and they're picking corn here now, but it's got to come out for me to be able to access my farm very well at all. So it's just patience, and I know some guys really struggle with that.
You know where he's at, that sanctuary area. And so I'm assuming you knew that based on what he did last year. So did you go in the off season? Did you pre-hang anything? Do you have anything set up already? Or are you going to be going in season, hang and hunt?
No, I pretty well on my own property. I pre-hang, presets. It's so much easier, especially when you're going in with camera equipment and video and stuff. But 90% of the time on my own property, it's all preset. And I do most of my pruning and scouting and stuff in March and February, March. And I hung, that's when I hung a stand for him for this year. So I shouldn't say I don't even have a stand hung. I've got steps, I've got it pruned, everything's ready to go. And I'll slip in. I normally go in there with a mower, a bush hog, and I haven't done that. In fact, I was going to do it today. It's raining here today. Now, my goal is to get it done here before the weekend. And I'm going to get the stand hung. I'll go in there with a bush hog and make all the racket and the noise with the tractor and the bush hog mowing, and I'll put the stand on the tractor, and then I'll just get off, hang the stand, and make sure everything's okay, and then I'll just get out of there. But yeah, I'm pretty patient on that kind of stuff. I don't get too rambunctious as far as running deer around. I never have. But there's so many different ways guys can kill big deer. It's not. I've said forever, it's not magic. You just think about a buck that's walking through the woods during the rut. How many trees in a day could a hunter be sitting in, have the right wind, and kill that buck? There's thousands of trees, and it's. Yeah. I'm not trying to dumb it down, but point. There is literally, in a 24-hour span, or say a 12-hour day, daylight hours, there's probably 1,000 trees that a guy could be in that a buck walks by and you could kill him. So I don't get too caught up in trying to make anybody else believe I'm doing anything magical. It's a lot of it's persistence and patience.
Yeah. So this setup you've got that you're going to go mow the trail to and throw the stand up there, can you break down that spot? Why is that the spot you think you can get him killed? How's that going to work
This
for
is
you?
this piece of wood, it's a pretty square woods. It's got a creek that runs through it. And what he does is he stays on the north side of the creek almost, well, every time I've seen him do what he does to go to his bed, he's on the north side of the creek. It's a jungled mess. There was a tornado went through this woods years ago, and there was a bunch of hedge trees on that side of the creek. And they are a jungled mess. You can't, and there's really no good place to even hang a stand in there. It's such a mess. But he gets in there and he's bedding he's got an old pasture. Well, there's cattle in the pasture, but he puts his back to that pasture, and he's laying with basically his back on the fence. And you can't really access it except across the pastures. There's no way to get through the woods to it. You got to come across the pasture. And I'll have to wait till there's an east wind, or I'll probably try to cheat it a little with a southeast, because I saw what he did both times last year when he bedded. He went in there with a southeast wind. So that's probably what I'll wait on. And when I get the right conditions, I'd like to try to get in there before, the first part of November, before they really start running around a lot. Like to try to get in there while he's pretty consistent, stay in there. But this farm actually, before I bought it, there was an older fellow that owned it, and he actually mowed a trail around the inside rim of that woods. And it was because he cut firewood. So it gave him access. It's just it looks like just a mowed trail around this inside perimeter. And he did it so he could access for firewood. Well, he started letting me hunt years ago, and I noticed the deer paid no attention to him. I could be in there in a tree stand, and deer paid no attention to him when he'd come around there on his John Deere side by side. So I bought the farm, I think it was 17 years ago, and I've continued to mow that trail for a couple of reasons. I think it gives deer, especially bucks, they know where the danger zone is, and they know where they're safe. And they can use that little buffer area that I mow, they use it as it's just a spot that they know, hey, I can get from here to here. I feel safe. Once I cross this line, I know I may be in danger, but it also gives me access. That's the big thing. I've got access in and out of there. I use an electric bike, and it gives me access. I'll go in and mow it short. I'll pick up all the sticks, get all the brush out of the way, but then I can access it myself. But for this particular deer, it's probably going to be coming across the pasture. I'm probably not going to be using this mowed trail, but I've kept the mowed trail up, kept it mowed just because of it'd been done for years, and I noticed the deer, they'll walk the trail, but the bucks normally stay inside it. Does and fawns seem like they'll walk that trail, but bucks seem to want to stay on the inside of it. They don't want to see, the younger ones, they'll get to it, but walk it. But for the most part, the mature bucks want to stay on the inside of that trail. And it's kind of something I'd noticed years ago. And it's the only farm I've got that's got that mowed trail on it. It's not something I typically do, but it was just there. And I noticed that mature bucks like to stay inside. So it does kind of shorten the woods down for me as far as hunting. But no, this buck's I'm going to have to wait till the corn's out to where I can access it good. And he's got a couple other bucks staying with him. They'll come in there and bed right next to him. And it's kind of odd that I say next to him, 10, 15 yards, but they're staying right in the same spot.
If it weren't for the standing corn, would you have tried to get in there after him earlier in the season, or would you wait till that late October time period either way?
Yeah, I'm probably waiting till late October regardless. Of all the bucks I've killed three. I've killed three in October out of that whole group. So that tells you I don't live close to where I hunt. I'm an hour away, so I don't get that access. I don't get the evenings to run out, check out the bean fields, an hour or so at night. I don't have that availability to me that, guys that live close to where they hunt, it is handy. It's a lot handier, but I'm 50 minutes to an hour from where I hunt, so I have to spend some time on the road, so I don't get that. The early season thing for me is it's really rolling the dice. I mean, I think you can run some deer out, you can run some deer off your property, because it's hard to beat a deer back to his bed this time of year. I mean, you got to be in there way early if you think you're going to beat him to his bed.
Mm-hmm.
And in this heat, I've got the time off in November. I've always taken my time off in November. So obviously that's part of it too. You can only hunt when you can hunt, but I don't typically have a buck. This year's kind of a fluke for me, because I don't typically have a buck I can tell you right where he's bedding. I can tell you a vicinity, or I can tell you where he's coming and going from. But I'm not close enough there to actually stay on top of what these deer are always, where they're staying all the time. And it changes, you get a buck that you're chasing, he gets killed. Well, then you're starting over square one. So.
I heard your buddy Andre once tell me that he hates the rut because it's so hard to get after a specific buck because they start doing crazy things. Have you had that same frustration, even though that's your main time to hunt? Or have you found that you're able to still get after a specific deer that time?
Andre and I, we've talked about this a lot. I've been friends with Andre since, I don't even know, early 90s. And we talked yesterday. We talk a lot. I mean, I talk with him all the time, but his method of hunting, his style is not my style. It just never has been. And that's why I said there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, but I'm pretty much a terrain hunter. I mean, so the rut is that's what I can't wait for. When these bucks get to moving, and I'm hunting terrain. I'll be the first to admit I don't hunt trails. I don't hunt sign. Now, will there be a lot of times I'll hang a stand in terrain, won't go back to it for 2 or 3 weeks. You go back and there's rubs and there's all kinds of sign around you. But I'm pretty well a travel corridor type hunter. I mean, that's just basically the whole way I hunt. It's all based on how the ground lays and pinch points, fingers, draws. That's how I hunt. And I know it's not the same for everybody, obviously, but Andre's gotten that perfected on that bump and dump stuff. He's got that perfected now. Cody does it too. Those guys can bump stuff, get in, hang stuff, and get right back on them and kill them. And first of all, I'm not that aggressive. That's why I mentioned early on, I'm not an aggressive hunter, and you got to have some aggression to do that style of hunting. You just got to. But I also had a guy tell me one time, what would it take to run you out of your bedroom? And when you think of it from my perspective, how many times would you have to have somebody run you out of your bedroom before you'd actually leave?
Yeah.
And, when you think of it from that perspective, I'm not sure you can run a mature buck out of his bed. But that's not the way not my style of hunting. I just never have been that way. I'm really a lot more cautious hunter. Conservative, I should say, maybe not cautious, but I'm a lot more conservative. I just kind of let things play out. I always figure that in the end, if I know where that buck's home core area is, I'll get him killed during the rut.
So in that kind of situation where you're after one deer and you're hunting mostly terrain and travel corridors, a lot of guys, when they're after one specific deer, they're going to be analyzing camera photos and sign and all that kind of stuff. But in your case, where it sounds like it's more, travel and terrain specific, is it mostly just identifying, okay, well, here's the 2 pinch points coming in and out of his main core area, and I'm just going to volume hunt those based on wind until he eventually does come through? Or how do you do that when you're after a deer? It's not just like you're going to shoot 10 different bucks. You're after like one buck in the rut.
Right. And I hang way more stands in a year than most people could imagine. That's one thing. I don't hunt a stand I don't go to a stand over and over and over. I mean, I'll hunt a stand 3, 4, 5 times in a season, and that'll be it. I do a lot of all-day sits, especially during the rut. And for me, I probably put in a lot more work or time in a tree to get a deer killed than what some guys do because of what they're more aggressive. And I have to play. I'm playing the game of sit back and wait. Part of that's because I like being out there. Part of it in this part of Illinois, you never know what the neighbor's gonna. A deer you don't even know's around may show up. So yes, I'm after. I know, like I said, this year I got 2 deer. Then I'm 2 bucks that I know I'm after. Does that mean I may not shoot something I've never seen before? I've done it several times. Several times. Buck shows up with the doe during the rut. You think, where did he come from? And you can get him killed. But part of that too is the fact that these deer that move, they come from a mile away, 2 miles away. They aren't familiar with the dangers in that specific timber. They're coming in there and they're following the doe. And what she does is what they do. So when you're in a travel corridor, you can get them killed that way. And I've killed a lot of them. I mean, a lot. There's not many deer I've killed that I don't have any pictures or have never seen before. But I've got a handful that you look up, here they come, you think, where'd that deer come from? But typically I know what I'm after, and typically it's a waiting game, and you're just playing cat and mouse. I'm not bumping them. I'm not hanging sets on top of their beds. But I typically try to find, okay, I know this buck's going in this vicinity of this woods or this draw. How's he getting there with certain winds? And why is he traveling it the way he does with certain winds? And then I try to set up accordingly. And I don't know, it's paid off for me through the years. And there's, like I said, there's several different ways to kill big deer. I mean, guys that think it's got to be done a certain way, I just kind of chuckle at, because my style of hunting is no ways near what, Andre's is, and Justin, Justin and Heath Cisco, those guys, they do a lot of hang and hunt sets, bumping deer. I can tell you I can count on one hand the number of bucks I've set up on their beds and killed them. Mm-hmm. Most of mine have all been travel corridors, hunting terrain.
Could you break down an example of one of these terrain features that would be a dynamite set during the rut, or maybe one of each, like a real terrain topographic feature you would love to sit, and then more of like a cover related travel corridor kind of set? What might an example of those two look like?
Okay. I personally, of course, there again, a lot of it's got to do with where I'm hunting, the Midwest. I love draws. Long draws out into ag fields, something that you can access. First of all, I typically never walk far into the woods. Most all of my set stuff is, and I won't say along the edge, but I'm going to say I've got creek access, or I've got some way to access to my stand that is not through the woods. Minimally invasion, to what. So I don't like tipping deer off that I'm there, So I try to figure out, how can I get here? And draws, if you can get in the bottom of them, or if you can come in from the sides, the ag fields, that's typically how I approach all of those type of situations. But there again, I'm hunting terrain and features in a draw. You normally got low ground. I don't like low ground. Typically never hunt low ground myself. Thermals, killers, as far as especially evenings. But, the thermals of a morning, you can get by with some low ground stuff, but I don't hunt it. I mean, I'll be the first to tell you, I might hunt one piece of low ground in 5 years. I just don't ever. I've had such bad luck with thermals and the way bucks know. They know how the thermals operate. They know how to get in and out of places, and that's the reason a lot of low ground stuff to me is unhuntable. But When what I'm looking for in a draw is an area that say is kind of like a flat or a flatter part that pinches down, and normally it's because of the creek or the way the draw lays, where it pinches down and deer have to make a decision. Do I go to the bottom? Do I stay on top? And those are the spots I love hunting draws where there's a pinch point, because they typically, a deer's going to travel a draw basically the way the draw runs. They've got to travel it east, west, north, south, however the draw runs, they're going to travel it lengthwise. So I'm looking for a pinch point, and I love a flat area that butts up to a pinch point. And it kind of, the flat areas kind of give them a place to stage, hang out, and then as soon as a buck shows up, especially during the rut, well, these deer are going to go down the draw. And normally they'll, you let all the does go by, or the smaller bucks, and next thing you know, well, here comes a decent buck. But ends of draws, points on draws. If you get a draw that goes out in forks, you'll have like one big draw forks into two smaller draws.
Yeah.
Those areas, I like to hunt those points, and I like to be on the very tips of them, the very ends of them. And it's a tough one as far as wind, because wind can swirl around those points and it'll suck it back into the draw. So you've got to be careful on those points. You got to pay, and a lot of times I'll be able to hunt a point, and it's got to be a northwest wind. It can't be north, can't be west. It's got to be northwest. And something I would really advise people to do. Guys get up in their stands and they hang a set. Take your phone in with you. Make sure your phone's with you. Sit in that tree and get a good compass app. Look at the compass app and know exactly what direction you're facing. I don't know how many times, and I've got ground I've hunted. This one farm I've hunted for over 40 years. And you can sit in that tree and you know which way is north, south, east. You just know which way it is. You put your compass up and you think, man, that's a quarter turn off or a little less, and so then you think, okay, well, I can't use straight north. I've got to have northeast or northwest or whatever. But take a compass to your tree. And I've talked with some guys through the years with guys that killed big deer, and everybody's been in agreement. I don't know if you know Jim Ward. Jim does a ton of deer management for buck beds and killing big deer.
Yeah.
And Jim and I had this conversation years ago, and he's the same way. He's like, yeah, you go to a tree and you think, I know that's north. And you know what? You might be a little bit off, and you can't hunt a north wind. You got to have a little west or a little east. Take your compass with you in your phone so you know what direction, what winds you need. Because it's too late. When you get there the first hunt and you're getting busted left and right, it's too late.
Yeah.
So now you've already boogered up a set that you had high hopes on. So, but I love hunting points, draws, saddles, ridges, halfway down the ridge. It's seldom in this area do I see bucks run the top of a ridge. They're a third or halfway down the ridge. They just travel the backside of it, according to the wind, of course. If you got a north wind, they're probably going to be on the south side of the ridge. And I've also got a kind of an odd thing, I'll tell you, that through the years I've noticed. If you pick out the biggest tree in the woods, if you're in the woods, you're looking around, you see one of those giant white oaks or a giant tree of some sort. It seems like, and this is strange, people call me crazy, but I swear those huge trees attract the mature bucks. I don't know what it is, but it looks like year after year, if I've got a big tree in the woods, mature buck will go by it every time. And I don't know what it is. You can't hunt the tree, obviously. They're too big to even put a stand in, but
right.
I'm strictly, I'd say 99% of the time I'm hunting terrain, pinch points. And I got a buddy I've hunted with for years, and he always asks me, so why do you want to be right here? He's asked me for years. And I get a feel, it's kind of hard to explain sometimes, but you get a feel for where you're at and what you think a big deer is going to do. and with a certain wind, what's he going to do? Now you're going to get fooled. You're going to get in there and think you know what you're doing and what you're talking about. You're going to get fooled. The deer's going to do just the opposite. Wind's going to be at his back. He's going to be traveling the thing. You can't. You shake your head and think, well, how do you kill that deer? The wind. He's not doing anything close to what you think he should have done. But for the most part, mature bucks are going to travel either with a crosswind or the wind in their nose. They just do. And when you get in a draw, these big timbers, these big woods are hard to shut. They're hard to shut a deer down. I mean, they can go anywhere. And part of the reason I don't like to hunt big woods is because of that. I'll go find something that's smaller, something that leads up to it, a fence row. But I don't. I just don't like the bigger timber. I like the smaller stuff. I love hunting 5-10 acre patches. But you got details. That's a big thing on these, especially on smaller timbers. You gotta pay attention to details. And you can't just go stomping in with any wind. You just run the set 1 or 2 hunts, you're done, But boy, if you pay attention to the details and you can get into these small areas, small wood lots, fence rows out in the middle of nowhere, if you can get into them, right wind, right conditions, they can be dynamite for killing mature bucks.
Yeah, so during the rut.
The dump and dump thing, I actually wish I was good or knew more about, and I don't say know more about, but I wish I was better at what those guys do as far as bumping big deer, setting up on them, because that's just not my game, never has been.
Yeah. So with your style of hunting,
I'm always
during the
afraid
rut,
I'll jump on and never see him again.
Yeah. The style of hunting that you do then, which is this terrain focus in the rut, poses a couple interesting questions. If so much of your hunting is dependent on, being on those travel corridors, there's this dilemma that I face a lot when I'm trying to figure out the right spot to sit in a good-looking travel corridor, because there'll be the pinch point, or there will be the saddle, there'll be that head of a draw where they're all coming around the ditch, whatever it is, and let's say that looks great and it's obvious, so that's the spot. But what happens when you don't have that perfect tree that's perfectly in range of that spot, right? I often will sit there and I'll be sitting there trying to pick the tree, and I'll think, well, this is the tree that gives me the best shot at the 20 yards or whatever to that little crossing or whatever it is that I'm hunting. So do you pick the tree that's in the perfect location, but let's say that tree has no good cover, and maybe there's also like a secondary trail downwind of it too, so you're risking maybe getting winded a little bit more and you're not going to have much cover? Do you take that one still, though, because it gives you the easiest shot right to the spot? Or do you take the tree that's farther away, but it has great cover and there's no way you're going to get winded? But now you're talking, he might be in range, he might not be in range in that one. What would you err towards in that kind of situation?
Well, you probably think this is too easy, but what I would do in that situation is like I talked earlier. That deer's going by 1,000 trees when he walks that, or 100 trees, whatever it is in that draw. Go figure out where's a better location to cut him off. And that's typically, I can spend, and I don't mean this, I mean hours I can spend on one setup trying to figure out, okay. And I always tell everybody, pay attention to how you walk personally. When you're walking a draw or you're walking ground, pay attention to how you walk it. Humans are lazy. Mature bucks are dang sure lazy. You're going to probably walk that similar to how a mature buck walks that, because they don't want to go up and down the hill 5 times if they don't have to. They don't want to cross the fence. They don't want to, these features in this ground, they want to walk the easiest way they can, but they want to walk it for darn sure with the wind in their favor if they can. So I would, on the scenario you just said, I would probably say, okay, I can't hunt there, but let's go, where'd this buck come from? Where's he coming from? Let's go figure out another place that you can shut him down. And like I said, I've spent hours, and I told you, I got this one farm I've hunted 40 years. And 2 years ago, This draw that I've hunted, I've killed probably a handful of 150 plus bucks in this one draw. Thought that the east end of this draw, I thought there's no way to get to it, no way to hunt it. Just thought I just never even really tried because I just thought it was unhuntable. I thought I'm just going to be blowing everything out of here. There's no way to get to it. So 3 or 4 years ago, I'm standing in there in February or March, and I'm looking at all these rubs in this little flat, and I'm thinking to myself, how can I get in here? I thought, okay, there's an old logging road that's been in there for, I don't know, probably been there 30 years now, on the other side of the draw. So now I've made up my mind, I'm going to walk across this draw to get up to this flat. I'm going to come up this, it's not really a bluff, but it's a real high hill. I'm going to go straight up this hill and into my tree. I'm 5 steps off the edge of this flat. It's been a dynamite tree. It's just, and in all those years, I thought there's no way to hunt it. Well, there's ways to hunt things. You kind of, and I think the longer you hunt a woods, the worse hunter you become because you've had success in here, here, and here, and you keep going back to that here, here, and here. Well, deer change. Of course, they get you patterned as well. So, I moved a stand, hung a stand in there, and first time I went in there, had 3 different bucks over 140 come by me. I thought, you got to be kidding. I've never hunted this all these years because I thought it was unhuntable. And here we are in a rut, and they're just piling through here. And last year was the second year I hunted it. Saying I've not killed a buck out of it, but I'll kill a good one on this spot. And I had probably, I don't know, I had one day I had 8 different bucks by me, Pope and Young. None of them probably were 140, but eventually it'll pay off. But yeah, I look at an area, and if I think, man, I can't hunt here, back up, walk down the draw, go, it's the same deal. That deer is going to get from point A to point B somehow. And if you think, well, this is where I want to be, you may be making a mistake. Don't be where you want to be. Be where you have to be. I mean, that's pretty well the way I approach it. It's like, man, I'd love to be here. And you look around, no tree to hunt. You think, man, I'd love to be here, but you just walk away. Head down the draw one way or the other, or find another spot.
Yeah.
I know that sounds almost too simple, but that's just the way I approach it as far as.
No, it's a great point. The other part of that equation, though, is the wind, right? And you mentioned a little bit ago how, that there's certain things that we think a buck's going to do with the wind, and then sometimes they surprise us. But usually the buck's going to be trying to use that wind to his advantage when he's traveling, maybe with it in his face or crosswind or something like that. So with that being said, a lot of folks I know, and myself included, will try to find ways to set up, where you can hunt where the buck thinks he's using the wind in a favorable way for himself, but also you can get away with it, right? Cutting the edge or cutting the corner in some kind of way. Can you talk about how you do that in these kinds of setups, in these kinds of like draws that you're hunting? How do you typically like to hunt that? Is it with the wind going perpendicular across the draw, or do you have it almost parallel but just off parallel, so it's blowing either down into the valley or out into the field? How do you typically try to set up and use wind in this kind of draw scenario where we've got a narrow finger going out into a field or something, and you're hunting in there?
Here in central Illinois, you got about everywhere you hunt, you've got ag fields. So I'm typically letting my scent blow to the ag fields of a morning. And if I've got a situation where I think a deer's traveling maybe the edge of a morning, I'll try to set up to where the wind's over the top of him. Typically in a morning setups, the bucks will walk the edges. They won't walk out in the middle of the field, where they're going to wind you. But if you can get the wind over the top of them, that's one thing I try to do. If I think, okay, this buck may come along this edge, I'll try to get high enough that the wind's over the top of him.
Blowing out over top of him, but blowing out towards the field. So you're into the timber a little ways, and it's blowing above him out.
Yes, okay. Into the ag fields. Yes.
Okay.
Yep, I'm blowing my scent into the ag field, 50, 75 yards off the edge. Try to get over the top of something. Typically in a draw, when you've got crosswinds, which is what you totally have to hunt, it's hard to hunt a draw with the wind going up and down it, obviously.
Yeah.
But typically you're dealing with a crosswind in a draw. You've got to hunt it with a north, south, east, west, depending on which way the draw is running. And I'll try to set up to where the wind and it's another good scenario is when you've got this crosswind and you've got this creek or draw that's running east west, and you're going to hunt it on the north side of the draw. So you're going to want a south wind, and as that south wind comes across that low ground, a lot of times the wind will pick up. It'll lift. It's the thermals. It'll lift of a morning. So it actually helps you as well get the scent a little higher over the top of stuff. But I'll typically look for this spot that has a piece of the draw that jets out into a field. It doesn't have to be 5 yards. Just along the edge, something that jets out, and set up on that. Set up to where you're not really in the main travel area of that draw. Just get away from. You get into some of these situations, you think, well, yeah, that's a needle in a haystack. Well, it may be. You may walk a whole draw and think, well, there's nothing here that interests me. Does that mean you can't kill a buck in it? No. It just means it's not an ideal situation or an ideal setup. But back to your point on the wind. Fellow told me one time years ago, the perfect wind is one that's almost right for the deer and almost wrong for you. And when you think about that, you think, and that is so true. It's almost, you're constantly playing that wind game, and you're constantly cutting, situations it's always a close call. I mean, it just is. But square timber, I'll tell guys this, square timber, I like to be 50, 75 yards off of a corner. If you got a square corner, get 50 to 75 yards off of the corner and hunt it with a wind I don't like a quartering wind when I'm hunting a square woods on a corner, because what'll typically happen is the wind will come through, and it'll on that corner, that wind will suck right back into that corner every time. If you've got say you're on a north end of a woods, 50, 75 yards from the east side, and you think, okay, I need to have a south wind here, but I could probably get by with, say, a southwest. Well, that west will be enough for that wind to come out to the corner, and it'll suck it right back in that corner. I don't know how many times I've seen that happen. And after you do it 2 or 3 times and you get winded, you think, well, this doesn't work. Typically, I tell guys, on a square woods, and not every woods lays directly east or west, north and south, but I want a direct, straight wind in my face when I'm hunting a square woods, because it will suck it back in the corners.
Interesting.
I mean, there's a lot of experience that goes into wind and thermals when you're hunting. You say this like you've got this figured out, but I can tell you many times that I've gotten busted, thinking you had it figured out, and that didn't work. Well, guess what? Start over and learn from it. A lot of experience goes into killing mature bucks, as far as, you learn from your bad experiences more than you do the good ones. If this works, perfect. Let's figure out why it worked.
Yeah. I was just going to ask, is there anything you've found that has provided you a safety net for when the wind goes wrong? Do you have any scent control program to try to help you out in that kind of position? Do you have any cover scent, anything that's helped you out, or is it 100% just got to make the wind work?
I don't know, maybe I'm too hard-headed on this, but I've got friends that use ozonics. I've got friends that use the charcoal clothing, and every one of them will tell you, yeah, I got busted. I've got 2 guys I know that use 2 ozonics in their tree. Hell, deer got out there in the field in the evening, and there's a bunch of does out there feeding, and here comes a buck they want to shoot. Well, the field scattered and something picked them off. I'm thinking, I don't think there's any shortcuts. I don't think you're beating a deer's nose. I don't care what you do or what you try. People say, well, he was directly downwind of me. He may have been directly downwind, but that's not where your scent was going. Your scent was going somewhere else, either from the thermals, from swirling winds, from the terrain. Something changed the way you think your scent was going. Something was changing it before it got there. A deer doesn't just stand there with your scent blowing right to him. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So guys say, well, they were directly downwind, they didn't smell me. Well, they may have been what you think's directly downwind, but that's not where your scent was actually going. Because I don't think there's anything you can do to beat a deer's nose. I don't think you can do it. I mean, if a dog can smell stuff the way that, you've seen all these studies, these dogs pick up stuff that's buried, they pick up all this scent, and a deer's nose, 1,000 times better than a human's or something. And I don't think you can beat it. I just think you're going to have trial and error. Certain places you think you can hunt, it works, and certain places you think you can hunt, it's not going to work. But its experience is huge in the woods on that thermals and wind.
You mentioned trying to sometimes blow your wind over top of them. To do that, are you trying to get to a certain height in the tree usually to be able to get away with that sometimes? If so, what's that height you like to try to get up at?
I have hunted, and I've hunted from 6 feet off the ground to 25, 27 feet. I seldom get over 20 to 22 feet normally and I'm talking actual measured feet. Guys say they hunt 30 feet, and I look at the tree and I'm like, yeah, you're about 20 feet, but actual measured 20 to 22 feet is plenty high enough if you're on the edge of a field to get the scent over the top of them.
Okay.
I shot a buck last year. The buck I killed last year, scent right over the top of him. He walked the edge and scent was over the top of him. But it was a spot that I've hunted for years. I pretty well knew that, I'd get by with it. But 20 feet, 20 feet's pretty high.
Yeah. Can you break down that location you killed that buck at last year? So it sounds like you were in the edge of some kind of field, but why was that buck there? How did you set up on that, and why did he come through the way you thought he would?
This is another case of what I told you earlier. This buck, I have no past knowledge of this deer. I didn't even know he existed. It's a small wood lot. It might be 15 acres total. And it is a square corner where I'm hunting. And I'm going to say on this one, I'm probably 75 yards south of the north corner on the east side of the woods. And these bucks, of course, I've hunted it for years. I hunted it since I was in high school. So I've kind of got you got a pretty good knowledge of the woods. But these bucks like to take they like to make a loop in this corner. They don't go clear into the corner. They want to make a loop. They don't square it off. They'll round off corners.
Yeah.
So as they round off these corners, that's the reason I say don't stay on the corners. You got to get off 75 yards off of the corner, because a buck won't go to the corner and turn left and right and make square corners. They round off corners. And he was in there by himself. I don't know. It was 10:15 in the morning. I look up, and here he comes walking, making his loop through the woods. And it's during the rut. It's the 16th, 17th of November. And he's out cruising. He's turned his last doe loose, and he's out looking for another doe. And he rounds the corner and comes walking right to me. I mean, you can see in the video of it. He gets within, I'm going to say 20 yards of me, facing me, he's coming right at me. And it's not a very good situation. And he cuts where a doe had walked through that morning. He cuts a track. He turns broadside. I can't even shoot him. Same thing, walks, and he goes to the outside of the woods. And as soon as he goes to the outside, he turns and walks right down the outside edge. But there's not, if I took you in that woods and you saw the sign in that woods where I'm sitting, you would never sit there. But experience, knowing the woods tells, you can learn a lot if you just pay attention and carry it over year to year. How did a buck, I saw a mature buck in here, whatever he was. How did he walk the woods? How did he cover it? What was the wind? And keep that memory bank, and just keep remembering that stuff, that, hey, this is how he traveled this woods. Does it make sense? It may not make sense to you. You may think, well, that's crazy. Guess what? The next year you set up in there where you could have killed that first buck. Here comes the next one the next year, and he's going to do the same thing. And you think, why is he doing this? Or why do they do this? But I've been pretty successful being a conservative hunter. So that's, guys do what works for them.
Yeah.
And I've just been successful being conservative and laying back and letting things play out, more so than being aggressive. So there is times I kill deer that I don't know anything about, but for the most part.
With that approach, do trail cameras factor in at all for you? I mean, it seems like when you're depending on these terrain features, it's not like you're chasing a deer all over the place. You're just waiting for that deer to come through the pipe, right? Do you lean much on cameras or not so much?
Yeah, I do. I use the camera strictly for inventory.
Okay.
I got a bunch of cell cameras, and I run probably too many of them. And it's a lot of us, so I don't have to go check them, so there's no intrusion, You just hang a camera, and you don't go back until the batteries are dead. But
yeah.
And part of it's because I'm an hour away from where I hunt. But I use a lot of my camera stuff is strictly for inventory. Is there a buck on this farm that I even want to chase? Some years there's not. And don't waste your time. Now, do cameras tell the whole story? No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I had 2 cell cameras in this woods I'm telling you about. This buck had never been on them. So no, mature bucks especially can get by cell cameras or any camera, and they walk 10 yards behind the tree or whatever. You don't even know they're around. But community scrapes, especially long edges, I love those for cell cameras. It just gives you an inventory of what's there. And then I make my decisions on how am I going to hunt this piece. If I know there's a buck I want to kill, then I just, part of it, and I know the guy's going to say, well, you know what? I don't have unlimited acreage to hunt every year. And I get that. I'm fortunate. I've got half a dozen different farms that I hunt, so I can bounce around. If you don't have anything to kill, go to a different farm, hunt where you got something you want to shoot. And there again, that sounds simple and easy, but don't waste your time somewhere that there's not something you want to shoot. But yes, I use cell cameras. I use a lot of them, and I just use it for inventory, so I know what farm to avoid or what farm I want to hunt.
Yeah. So if you get a picture of the buck you're after, or one of the bucks you're after, showing up day yesterday, let's say, will you ever chase that picture? Will you ever say, all right, well, he was in that funnel yesterday, I should go spend some time there? Or are you too late at that point and it doesn't really matter?
Well, see, that's the problem with the way I hunt. That is one drawback, is typically I'm hunting the rut. So just because you saw him there yesterday at 10 o'clock in the morning, no. Will I go set up there the next day at 10 o'clock in the morning to try to kill that specific? Now, number one, if the wind's right, I might go in there the next day. But typically you're chasing your tail at that point. And that's the reason Andre doesn't, these guys that are trying to kill a specific buck on their bed, that's the reason they don't like it. It's because there's no consistency to what that buck's doing. But that's what I'm banking on, is the inconsistent movement of mature deer. I'm banking on, that buck's going to come through this certain corridor that I'm hunting, or the setup that I'm hunting. I'm banking on, if I'm there for 2 days, I'm banking on he's coming through there at some point. If I sit all day for 2 days during the rut, he's coming through, unless he's pinned down with another doe or something. But I'm banking on, if he's moving, he's coming through here. It doesn't always pan out, but you're only looking for, in a year's time, you're only looking for 2 times you got to be in the right spot.
Yeah.
And things have got to go right, of course. You still have to make the shot, but for the most part, I'm banking on that deer's coming through here. When he's out cruising, he's coming through here at some point. In a couple of days, I'll get him killed, but doesn't always work. But neither does setting up on beds.
Yeah. Is that usually what you do when it comes to assuming the wind works? When you're hunting these terrain features where you are depending on, he's going to come through eventually, do you usually try to do 2 days at a time to give that window of opportunity, or 3 days at a time? Is there a typical number of hours or days where you will sit a great location like that, assuming the winds are right?
Assuming the wind's right, you don't get, if the wind doesn't change for a day or two, which sometimes that's the way it is around here. We might get 4 or 5 days in a row of the same wind, but I don't typically hunt more than 2 days in one spot. But my first day, normally if I go to a spot, they'll tell me a lot of whether I'm coming back the next day or not. If I go to a spot like that, and let's say I go there and I sit all day and I don't see hardly anything, and I know during the rut, it's a dynamite spot. I've been there before. I've seen them come through here. I'm going back the next day because I know the odds are in my favor. It's going to pay off at some point. And if you don't see anything one day, you can about bet the deer just weren't on that part of the farm. The next day you'll probably have a better day. But I don't like to hunt a spot more than 2 days in a row. I'm normally bouncing around.
Okay.
And I'll have normally 25 sets hanging. By the time the rut gets here, I'll have 25 stands out, 22, 23, 25, somewhere in that range most every year. And then if, you get something where you're chasing a buck that you don't have any sets that you think you can kill him, it's hang and hunt, climb and stand or hang and hunt. I don't mind doing it if I'm after a certain buck in a certain area and I think I can't get him killed out of one of my presets, but I do typically hunt preset stands.
So back to kind of that decision of which of those places to hunt. I know we've talked about like there'll be a buck you're after, you kind of figure out where his core is. So let's say like this buck that you know about this year, he's in this spot by that fence. I imagine then there might be a number of different terrain features or travel corridors that maybe extend out from there. So I don't know. I obviously don't know the specifics, but let's just say there's like 2 draws and then there's like 2 other travel corridors. So maybe we'll say there's like 4 different places where maybe his movement might pinch down eventually at some point where you could catch him. And you're thinking on it's the night before the hunt or the morning of the hunt, and you're making the decision of, okay, where should I hunt today? Is it solely based on what's the wind and then a hunch based on history, or are you ever doing any other level of scouting or anything else that's going to help you choose where you're going to hunt on that given day? Maybe the better way to phrase this is just what are the variables going through your head when you're trying to pick, okay, which of these corridors, which of these features do I hunt tomorrow morning?
Well, I'm able to bounce around. Like I said, I got enough stands hung normally that I can bounce around. And you're right. It's my decision is going to be 100% based on the wind. I'll look at the wind projections for the next day on an app on my phone. Then I start going through my mind. Okay, I've got this, and this stand to hunt with this wind. Have I been there yet this year? Is there a buck there I want to shoot? And if I've not been there, I'm going. I mean, I like to hit every stand at least once, during the rut and see if I'm right or wrong on my hunch on. And there's some stands I never hunt. I'll hang them, I never hunt them. But yeah, my decision making is 100% based on wind, where I'm going to go the next day. And not very often do I get up of a morning and change my plan from the night before. Now, if the wind's changed, it's not quite what it was supposed to be, or something like that, I might change, but not very often. If I make a decision, I'm going to go here, there, whatever. And there's times I'll think, dang, I haven't hunted that stand. I forgot that's perfect for this wind. I might go to it, but normally I make a game plan the night before, and that's where I'm going. And it's all based on wind. Have I been there? Is there a reason to go? That's your first thing. If there's no reason to go there, don't go. But I do most all my hunting based on wind. What stand I'm going to be in is going to be based on what the wind's going to be.
Do you usually stick in these spots? I know you say you do all-day sits a lot, but are those all-day sits in the exact same location through the entire day, or do you ever switch midday or in the afternoon to a different evening-focused spot? Or can these work the entire day?
There are some locations that I hunt that are terrible morning or afternoon. You think, okay, well, this is a great spot in the morning. It's terrible in the evening. It could be because you can't get out of there. It could be a location that now the deer are going to be in the field. They're all going to wind you once they get out there. And I do move some, but typically if I'm hunting pinch points, you've got bedding areas on some part of either one end or the other of what you're hunting. You've got reason for bucks to be either coming by, going to bedding areas, or coming out of bedding areas in the evening. So I've got several places that I can hunt an entire day and never move, and it's all because of where bedding areas are and how they're coming. Either they're going to them in the morning or they're coming out of them in the evening. So you're able to catch them either direction. But there are some places you can't sit there in the evening, and because if it's wind blowing out in the ag field and that's where they're going out to feed, all you're doing is educating deer in the evening. Then I'll move midday. I'll get out of there. But I'll tell you something else that's kind of strange for me personally is all the bucks I've killed. I would say, and I'm not being, I'm telling you the truth here. I've killed probably 5 or less in the evenings. So it's got to do with the way I'm hunting. And for me to put a finger on why, I can't tell you that, because I've thought about it. I've talked about it and I got guys that despise hunting mornings, and I would give up 3 evenings to hunt one morning.
Yeah.
But it's got to do with my style of hunting, obviously, because I'm killing most of all my deer in the mornings. Now I've killed some midday, I've killed some 10 o'clock in the morning, but the biggest buck I ever killed was in the evening. So it's not that I haven't killed good ones in the evening, but I think I could probably count on one hand out of all the deer I've killed that have been killed in the evening. Almost everything's mornings. So that's got to do with my style, obviously.
Yeah. So this style, as I'm like hearing you and as we've talked, I feel like I'm starting to get a more well-rounded picture of your approach. You're very rut-ish focused. You're very focused on catching these bucks once they get to traveling, as they're cruising their territory and they're checking does and they're getting after it in late October all the way through November. And so to do that, you're in these pinch points or in these terrain features where deer movement gets concentrated, using the wind the right kind of way. I'm starting to get a good picture here, but I'm curious, if you were a professor, you were teaching a class on this, and you were standing up in front of your class today, it's the end of class, and you want to make sure that someone who's listened to you today would remember 3 things, like the 3 rules of hunting the Brad Davis way. What would those 3 things be that you'd want folks to walk away with today at the end of your class? Could you think of those 3 most important takeaways, either when it comes to, choosing the terrain or stand sites or any of the things we've talked about, or something else entirely? What would those top 3 things be?
One thing I've not even touched on that I think is huge, that seldom gets talked about. I mean, I could do an hour talking with people on how to approach your stand, getting in, getting out.
Yeah.
Nobody hardly talks about it, but I think it's one of the major reasons guys run a set. They're tripping through, there's almost always a way that you can get to a stand with minimal disturbance. And that's one reason, not the whole thing, but that's one reason I love my electric bike. And I've only been using it. I think this will be my 4th or 5th year using an electric bike. But I always hated walking in, because deer know the cadence of a person walking. They know. Yeah. I mean, you can have deer 100 yards from you in the woods take off running. You hear them running in the dry leaves because they know a person's coming. They haven't figured out yet. Now, will they? I suppose as more guys use bikes or they get used to it, they may figure out there's danger with a bicycle. But you can drive up to deer 40, 50 yards away on a bicycle because there's no human foot cadence to it that they know. But getting in and getting out is, I mean, I try to find depressions, creeks, low ground, anything that gets me an advantage. And a lot of times it's extra work. And that's the reason a lot of guys don't do it. A lot of times that you've got to go around the long way. You got to cross something you don't want to cross, whatever. But when I hang a set, I look for the best advantage point for me to get to it with the least disturbance. And we've not even talked about it, but there was an old barn that was on one of my farms I used to hunt. I would actually walk through that old barn, and it was falling in, but I would walk through it because the dirt floor in the barn, well, you know what old dirt, pulverized dirt, it was so quiet, it was like walking on sand. Yeah. You could walk through it, and I was 10 yards from that corner of that barn. I just pop up in my tree, and I made no noise, but getting in and getting out is huge to me. I just think too many deer figure out, hey, this guy, he's walking in this direction. I mean, they cut your track. They know there's something up. They track you to your tree. You see deer do stuff when you're in the tree, but when you leave, they're doing the same thing when you leave. They cut your track. They're still tracking it to the tree. They're still smelling your steps or your sticks or whatever. But I just think getting to your tree, wind in your face, and getting there undetected is it's just huge. I think the least amount of disturbance you have with deer, figuring out, hey, somebody's hunting me or somebody's here. I think that's big. Nobody hardly ever. I mean, you can do hours and hours, and nobody talks about getting in and out of your set. How do you get to it? How do you get out of it? How do you get out of it at dark when you know deer are out in the field? If you got a way to get out of there without running all the deer off? Do you have to wade through them to get out? And if you do, you probably need to figure out a different way to get out or not hunt it in the evenings. That's one thing that I think guys should really pay attention to. And if you got to walk an extra mile, you'll be glad you did. If you kill if you kill a mature buck and you've had to walk an extra mile at the end of the day, you'll be thrilled.
Worth it.
And I think, I don't mean this to sound bad, but there's a lot of guys are just lazy. And I don't mean that as in general terms, they're lazy. They hunt lazy. They think, man, I can ride my four-wheeler up here. I can drive my truck and park the truck right here, and I won't have to walk as far. You're only cheating yourself. You're the one that's going to be paying for it because it's just going to ruin a set. Or guys say, well, deer don't pay attention to four-wheelers. Deer don't pay attention to this or that. Yes, they do. Sit in a tree in the dark and watch somebody, the farmer next door, take his four-wheeler out to his tree. You got deer blowing, carrying on. He can't hear it. Four-wheel's running. He's driving to his tree stand. I just think getting in and getting out undetected is a big, big thing. That would be one thing I would tell, especially new hunters, guys that are just getting into it. That's one thing. The other thing I always say is, it's a long learning curve, and I'm not even. I mean, I've been doing this for a lot of years, but I still learn stuff every year. Wind and thermals. It's just, lay of ground changes everything. When you think you got something figured out, the ground lays a little different than you figure, and it does something different in this spot than it did in that spot. But the wind it's huge. But if I had to tell some young hunter the best thing to do, like just starting out, I would tell them to stay back, spend more time watching an area before they just dive into it. Mm-hmm. Hunt from a perimeter spot that you're not doing any damage. Hunt 2 or 3 evenings from that spot and watch what the deer are doing. How are they traveling that draw? How are they traveling that woods? And where are they coming out of the woods? Where are they going into it? Just pay attention and then make a move. It's easier to not mess up a spot staying back and watching than it is to just dive in. Some guys just want to dive in right off the bat. And of course, that's never been my approach, but some guys are successful with it. Some guys can dive in and they've got that part figured out. I never have been able to. That's just not the way I kind of approach it. I always like to lay back and watch and see what's going to happen and then make a move and try to set something that, hey, I know I can get there of a morning, or I can get there in the evening. I can be there. They don't know I'm there. And that's probably the three things that I think guys make mistakes, is diving in and not really knowing for sure. They're just, it's a crapshoot. Some guys don't have a lot of time to hunt. That's the, when you spend 6 weeks a year, can hunt every day, it's a lot different than the guy that's got 1 week off from his job to hunt. He can't sit back 2 or 3 evenings or 2 or 3 mornings and see what's going to happen. So, and I understand that part, but guys need to pay attention and remember what they see a deer, a mature buck do, what they see him do. He didn't just do it once. He did it for a reason. And even if you don't see him move through that piece of woods again, the next mature buck's probably going to move through it very similar. They just have a certain way they want to move through a block of woods or a piece of timber, draw, whatever. There's certain ways they want to move through it with the wind in their favor. And you always have that outlier. Well, this buck he came through here with the wind at his back. Yeah, I'm sure he did. He had to get from there to there, and that's the only way he was going to get there that day.
Yeah.
But I think if your three things that you're talking about, I think the getting in and getting out with the least disturbance, least amount of scent on the ground, pay attention to the wind and pay attention to what deer, and I don't mean deer in general, I mean mature deer. When you see 3, 4, 5-year-old deer bucks do something, pay attention to it. They did it for a reason. And it may not pay off this year, may not pay off next year, but if you've got a piece of ground that you can hunt 3 years from now, you may kill a buck exactly doing the exact same thing that buck did that you saw, 2, 3 seasons before, because they travel a piece of timber, a piece of ground the same for a reason. So pay attention, just don't, it's not just happenstance that they do it.
Yeah.
And
that's such a good thing to remember.
I'm probably not giving you near the details stuff you want to hear, but that's how I approach it.
Great.
I mean, I'm pretty conservative. I also think there's a lot of guys overthink stuff. It's not rocket science. There's a lot of trees. Like I told you earlier, you just think about how many trees in a day's time a mature buck could be killed out of. I don't care what the wind is. There's still trees every day that you could kill a mature buck out of. You just gotta have one around. I mean, if you don't have one around, you can't kill him. You can't kill what's not there.
Yeah.
That's, it's easy to say, but it's just the truth. And living here in Central Illinois, typically have them.
Yeah. You make this great point though about how there's so many different trees that they walk by that you could be sitting in. It's almost, you can get stuck in this analysis paralysis when you do overthink things and you think, oh gosh, I have to pick the single one tree that it'll work from. And you make this great point that that's not necessarily the case. You do enough of the right things and you put in your time and you're smart about it with the right access. It can come together. So that I think almost relieves a certain burden off of you mentally, so you can kind of go into the hunt maybe a little bit, I don't know if this is the right word, but almost lighter when you're not stressing so much about having to have that one perfect tree. You go in with it a little bit, I don't want to say loose, and you don't want to be lackadaisical, but just knowing that, hey, you don't have to have this 2,000% the perfect tree, because there's all these other options, and it can come together when you do these 3, 4, 5 core things right. So that's a great takeaway from this today, Brad. I appreciate you sharing this. I know that
one other thing I was going to tell you, a lot of guys, everybody wants to be way back. Everybody wants to go deep. Everybody wants to, well, guess what? That buck, he may be back a mile off the road, but he's not there all day long, especially during the rut. So why go clear back there if you know he's got to come out of this piece of timber on this point, or he's got to come, if he's traveling from A to B, he's coming out of there somewhere. Why go clear in there? Why have to be deep in the woods when you can catch him coming out, or you might catch him coming into the woods? You just cut down your disturbance and basically you're not warning them every time you're there that, hey, I'm in here. I love hunting minimal disturbance.
Yep. Yeah, you can never go wrong with that. That's always going to be a good rule of thumb. Keep it low impact, keep them unaware, hunt with the right wind, putting the time in those right key spots.
You get guys that think that thinking that their way is the only way, and I'm probably I think there's a million ways to kill a big deer. You just got to have one around, and if I'm hiring somebody, if I've got a business and I'm going to hire somebody, and I'm talking to a guy and he hunts, he's a hunter, and he's a successful trophy hunter, I'm hiring him because I guarantee you he's not afraid of work. The guy that kills the biggest deer is paying his dues every year. Every year, he's out working the guy that wants to kill one but doesn't spend the time doing it. There is no part of what gets done on killing mature bucks that you take shortcuts. The guy that's willing to put in the time every year after year, pay attention to details, put in the work, that guy's going to be a heck of an employee too, because that's the way he's not afraid of work. So if you tell me you're a deer hunter, you never kill a big deer, and there's a guy next to you that's applied for a job, and these guys killing them every year, I think this guy, he's putting in the work. He knows I'm not afraid to work, or I know he's not afraid to work. I probably hire him every day because I know how much work it takes to kill mature bucks year after year. It's not easy. Even if you've got them around, it's not easy. And there's guys that think, well, they're behind every tree. No, they're not behind every tree.
Yeah. Well, man, you make a great point about deer hunting success helping with hiring decisions. We might see a whole new trend in folks in the deer hunting world having higher employment because of that.
Well, you do these podcasts all the time. The guys that are successful are not guys that are laying on the couch. They're not guys that are afraid to go out and do the extra work. They're not the guy that's afraid to hang 20 tree stands to know that only one of them's going to pay off. And
100%.
There's a lot of work and dedication that goes into killing mature deer year after year. There just is.
Yep. That might be the only thing that's consistent. Yeah, like that. You mentioned there's so many different ways to skin the cat, and there are. But the one thing every good deer hunter has in common, though their styles and their approaches might be different, they all work hard. That's the big thing. That's the through line.
Every one of them's putting in their time to do what they do. Whether it's whatever your approach is, every one of them's putting in the time and the work. You just have to. You got guys. Well, I'll just throw Andre out for an example. Yeah, he kills big deer every year. But it's not because he doesn't just go out there and say, I'm going to go kill this buck tonight and not had put any time in to do it. He's got it figured out too. I mean, he spent the time and he's paid the dues, and he knows obviously the curve probably does flatten with the more experience you have. That curve probably does flatten, but you still don't just kill big deer by not putting in the time and doing your legwork and the homework.
Yeah. Very true. Well, Brad, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this and share your perspective. I think you've got a style and an approach to this that I think is really helpful for a lot of folks to think about, because these days one thing that is kind of common is this overcomplicating of deer hunting, and I think you've got something here that folks could benefit from to kind of simplify it a little bit down to a couple core key things, and then just do that well. And that's a smart approach in a lot of cases. So thank you for joining us for that. Thanks for sharing that, Brad. I'm sure you're going to have a great hunting season, but I'll be pulling for you and cross my fingers for you too.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Me too.
And good luck to you guys.
Thanks.
Good luck to you as well.
All right, and that's going to do it for us today. Thank you for tuning in. I want to give you 2 quick updates. Number 1, if you are listening to this the week it came out, that being, the week of October 9th, be sure if you are in the area of Kentucky or Southern Indiana, Southern Illinois, Southern Ohio, anywhere in that neck of the woods, come on out this Saturday, October 14th. And join me and Mr. Giannis Putelis at our last Working for Wildlife Tour event. We'd love to see you down there. We're going to do some work collecting acorns for a native reforestation effort on the Daniel Boone National Forest. We're going to do some good work. We're going to have a great time. We're going to share some hunting stories, talk hunting tips and strategies, all sorts of good stuff while we're out there volunteering on public land. Would love to see you. Spend a little time midday doing some good stuff out there. So if you want to do that, if you want to join us, just go ahead and Google Working for Wildlife Tour Kentucky, and that will be probably the easiest way for you to find the link to the registration page with all the details and with the sign-up link. Hope to see you on Saturday. Number 2, Tony wanted me to mention that the Foundations episode this week, which would be coming out on what date would that be? October 10th it would have come out. That is very similar in theme to the conversation we just had here with Brad, kind of talking about ways to simplify and refocus your efforts during the hunting season and not chasing every squirrel running around in the distance. So good stuff to think about. I think our conversation here with Brad was a great reminder that sometimes you just got to stick to the fundamentals and do them well and do them consistently. That is a wise piece of advice. So hope you enjoy this one. Best of luck out there in the woods. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.